The night was alive with chaos. A monstrous storm raged across the sea, a force so violent it seemed intent on destroying everything in its path. The sky, once calm, had turned into a boiling cauldron of black clouds, lit by jagged streaks of lightning that tore through the heavens. Thunder exploded like cannon fire, shaking the very air and drowning out even the loudest cries of the disciples. Waves, towering and ferocious, rose like walls of water and crashed down on the small fishing boat, threatening to capsize it with each relentless blow. The vessel groaned under the pressure, its wooden planks straining to hold together as the storm sought to rip it apart. The disciples, drenched to the bone and trembling with fear, fought desperately to keep the boat afloat. Rain lashed against their faces like icy needles, blurring their vision and stealing their breath. The wind howled with such ferocity that it seemed alive, tearing through the sails and battering their bodies. Water poured into the boat faster than they could bail it out, and no matter how hard they tried, they couldn't keep up. The sea, wild and unforgiving, was winning. These men were no strangers to storms. Many of them were fishermen raised on these waters. They had weathered countless tempests before, but this storm was unlike anything they had ever seen. It was unnatural, otherworldly, as if the forces of nature had conspired to destroy them. Panic gripped their hearts. Their strength was failing, their hope fading. Death felt inevitable. And yet, as they battled the raging sea, one shocking detail stood out. Jesus was asleep. While they struggled and fought for their lives, he lay at the back of the boat, his head resting peacefully on a cushion, completely undisturbed. The disciples couldn't believe it. How could anyone sleep through such a storm? Did he not hear the deafening roar of the wind or feel the freezing spray of the waves? Did he not care that they were about to perish? Frustration boiled over. One of the disciples, his face pale with fear and his voice shaking with desperation, stumbled to where Jesus lay. He shook him awake, his words a mixture of fear and reproach. "Master," he cried, "wake up, don't you care that we're about to die?" Another disciple joined in, shouting over the noise, "We're perishing, help us!" The others watched, their wide eyes filled with pleading and panic. Jesus opened his eyes, calm and unbothered by the chaos around him. He sat up slowly, as if he had all the time in the world. Rising to his feet, he steadied himself against the violent rocking of the boat. While the disciples clung to the sides of the vessel, trembling and terrified, Jesus walked forward, stepping confidently through the storm. He reached the bow of the boat, standing tall against the raging tempest. The wind screamed around him, the waves rose higher and higher, and the rain lashed against his face, but he was unmoved. Raising his hand, he stood as a figure of complete authority. The disciples watched in breathless silence, unsure of what he was about to do. Then, with a voice that rang out above the roaring storm, he spoke 3 simple words, "Peace, be still." At first, nothing happened. The disciples held their breath, bracing for another wave, another surge of chaos. But then, as if the very elements themselves had been struck by the power of his command, everything changed. The wind, which had roared with deafening fury, stopped instantly. It didn't fade. It ceased, as if silenced by an unseen force. The waves, which had threatened to consume them, flattened into perfect stillness. The sea suddenly as calm and smooth as glass. The rain stopped falling. The dark clouds parted, revealing a night sky filled with stars. The transformation was so sudden, so absolute, that the disciples could scarcely believe it. They stood frozen in place, their soaked bodies trembling, their minds racing to comprehend what they had just witnessed. For a moment, there was nothing but silence, broken only by the gentle lapping of water against the boat. The storm that had seemed unstoppable, all-powerful, was gone, as if it had never existed. The disciples turned their eyes to Jesus. He stood there, calm and composed, as if commanding storms was an everyday occurrence. Their hearts pounded in their chests as awe and fear washed over them. Finally, one of them broke the silence, his voice barely above a whisper. "Who is this," he said, "that even the wind and the waves obey him?" The others exchanged glances, their wide eyes filled with wonder. They had seen Jesus perform miracles before. They had seen him heal the sick, cast out demons, and turn water into wine. But this was different. This was no ordinary miracle. This was authority on a scale they couldn't comprehend. It wasn't just the storm that had been silenced. In that moment, their doubts, their fears, their very understanding of who Jesus was, everything had been shaken and transformed. They realized they weren't simply following a teacher or a prophet. They were in the presence of someone far greater. They were standing before the one who held power over creation itself. As the boat rocked gently on the now calm sea, the disciples sat in stunned silence. They replayed the moment in their minds, hearing his words again and again, "Peace, be still." Those 3 words had not only stilled the storm, they had stilled their hearts. The silence after the storm wasn't just in the air, it was in their hearts. The disciples sat huddled together in the boat, still soaked from the storm's fury. They couldn't take their eyes off Jesus, who now sat quietly at the bow, his gaze fixed on the horizon as though nothing extraordinary had happened. Their awe grew heavier with every passing moment as they realized this was not just a man before them, but someone whose power reached far beyond their understanding. Each disciple's mind raced. They whispered among themselves, still grappling with the question, "Who is this?" The realization began to dawn on them, layer by layer. They had called him teacher, and indeed his wisdom was unlike anything they had ever encountered. They had even dared to hope that he might be the Messiah, the one promised to Israel. But this was something else entirely. Peter, always the bold one, was the first to speak. "Master," he said, his voice trembling, "when you spoke, it was as if creation itself obeyed you. How can this be? No prophet, no king, not even Moses did such things." The others nodded in agreement, their expressions filled with a mix of fear and wonder. Jesus turned to them, his eyes calm and kind, but with a depth that seemed to see straight into their souls. "Why are you afraid?" he asked gently. "Do you still have no faith?" His words cut through them like a knife, not as a rebuke, but as an invitation, a call to trust in the power and presence of the one who was with them. The disciples were silent, each man lost in his thoughts. They had seen him heal the sick, cast out demons, and turn water into wine. But this miracle felt different. It wasn't just about what he had done. It was about what it meant. Could he truly be the Son of God? The one who had spoken the universe into existence? If even the wind and waves obeyed him, what was there to fear? As the boat glided over the now still waters, the stars above seemed brighter than before. The air was cool and calm, carrying with it a strange and unexplainable peace. They reached the shore in silence, their hearts heavy with questions, but also brimming with awe. This was just one moment among many to come. The disciples didn't know it yet, but they were only beginning to see the fullness of who Jesus was. They had witnessed his power over the elements, but soon they would see him raise the dead, forgive sins, and ultimately conquer death itself. Who is this man who commands the wind and waves and challenges the very laws of nature? What does it mean to follow him? These questions would stay with the disciples, shaping their faith and preparing them for the incredible journey ahead. Want to hear more of these breathtaking moments and discover the life-changing power of Jesus? Subscribe now to uncover the miracles, wisdom, and love of the one who changed the world forever.